Wednesday, Memorial Day, May 30th. Thank you for joining us. I think you're really going to enjoy listening to what we have to say about today's show. Of course, today is really a day set aside to honor those who have fought for our freedom and to really take a moment and pause and reflect on how important that is and how grateful we should all be. We have a very special Green Spring resident with us, Ek Music, and Ek's done a lot of the shows talking about some of the battles and that kind of thing. But today we're really going to take a look back at kind of what Memorial Day means.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mary. It's a very significant day to, I think, the American public and certainly to veterans and their families. Excuse me. So. We have some videos, some photos we want to show today, but before we do that, I'd like to mention a little bit that I hope all of our residents have noticed that we have the usual, I refer to the usual photos in each of the neighborhoods that depicting cemeteries around the world. And
how did that actually start? Because we've actually had those up on easels in most of the lobbies in the three main community buildings.
I think this is either the fourth or the fifth year, and we just had the idea, and we went down to the National Battle Monuments Commission. That's always a tongue tie for me, and they had these photos, and that's how that all started. And so I've had them in my storage bin every year, and then we bring them out, and I get 2 or 3 people, and they put them in the different neighborhoods. It's really been nice.
And they really depict cemeteries where American soldiers have been?
Yes, just American soldiers, and there are 26 of them all over the world, and they're beautiful shots, and it's just very inspiring when you see them, frankly.
And this, because I'm really not a history buff, in terms of having one of our soldiers buried on foreign land, is that something that is just a decision that's made depending upon what the battle is, or? Well,
I don't know if I know the complete answer to that, but in the early, in World War I believe that they were when they were buried, you had a choice. Then later on, the government gave you a choice of bringing them back, and I think that still is the case. That the families have a choice on bringing the body back, and I think that's still the case today.
Yeah.
But some of our listeners will correct us if we're wrong.
Well, I think that's true, and they certainly can. It was just something that I thought, because when you have that opportunity to take a look at all of those different cemeteries, and really 26 different ones, that's amazing.
It is amazing.
Well, and I guess that just kind of talks about how many battles we've had and how important Memorial Day really is.
Yeah, and I'd really, before we get into anything else, maybe we can get into the actual the video and show that a little bit, and then we'll get into some of the horrors of war, as I refer to it.
Okay, so why don't we then go ahead, if we can, take a look. This will be a video that really kind of talks about how Memorial Day started and kind of the background of it.
Yeah,
so we'll take a look at that, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit.
Yeah, and while he's getting that up, it's
summertime. Summer, in the minds of most of us, begins with Memorial Day and ends with Labor Day, with a nod to Flag Day in June and a great celebration of Independence Day in July. Too often, though, we hear speeches about the Founding Fathers with very little attention to the Founding Mothers, without whom history would end in a single generation. Memorial Day is just around the corner, and it is worthwhile to note that unheralded women were almost entirely responsible for beginning this annual holiday. Its origin was the Civil War. Until recently, May 30th focused on the terrible war between the states that, at tremendous human cost, ended slavery. The late spring date was chosen because flowers would be in bloom all across the nation, which enabled everyone to join in what is still sometimes called Decoration Day. Flowers, usually grown by women, were central to Memorial Day ceremonies. They served as reminders of eternal hope and new beginnings. Unfortunately, though, in our modern-day observances of Memorial Day, we often forget the holiday's origins. The public often confuses Memorial Day with November's Veterans Day, and its Civil War message is lost. It should be remembered, though, and women's roles in creating it especially merits recognition. As from time immemorial, women cleaned up the mess. They took the gruesome reality of approximately 500,000 dead men, and by promoting cemeteries, led the way in turning blood and gore into something that encouraged serenity and reflection. Usually named some variant of Women's Relief Society, groups sprang up in both the North and South that not only memorialized the dead, but also cared for the war's disabled and its widows and orphans. In a time prior to today's well-organized Pentagon, women also ran countless soldiers' homes. Some were temporary, offering respite to men who walked hundreds of miles home from duty, while other soldiers' homes proved permanent residences for the war's disabled. Perhaps the earliest unacknowledged leader in this movement was Ellen Call Long of Tallahassee, Florida. Her father had been governor when Florida was still a territory and opposed secession from the Union. She did too, but the voices of women and elderly men were ignored when it became the third state to secede, 2 months prior to Lincoln's inauguration, and by a vote of 62-7. Former Governor Richard Keith Call died of natural causes during the war, and wartime Governor John Milton killed himself when he saw the consequences of the conflict that he had so thoughtlessly encouraged. Ellen Call Long, however, was there to lead when the fighting ended in April of 1865. Just weeks later, she organized a Women's Memorial Society to reconcile embittered enemies. On June 22, 1865, women adopted these profound, forgiving, and future-oriented resolutions, a much better analysis of the crisis than anything that came from men. The document read,
"The object of this meeting is to initiate a memorial association that shall perpetuate in an honorable manner the memory of the gallant dead. Our purpose is to reclaim from oblivion and defamation the memory and graves of those who, right or wrong, stood by their country's cause, firmly believing that posterity will acknowledge we did our duty. In no invidious spirit do we come. The political storm that shook our country to its foundation, we hope, is past. We are done with the Confederate cause and are willing to do all that women can do to stem the tide of bitterness and angry feelings. We will practice and teach forbearance and patience, which will finally bring peace and justice. The society shall not be ephemeral in its character, but a permanent institution, establishing an anniversary memorial observances, the object of which will be to renew and ornament the graves of soldiers, whether strangers or our own sons. This society proposes, moreover, to make a provision for the education of as many children of deceased soldiers as may be compatible with the means of said association. The memories of the past are written in blood and cannot be effaced, but go forward we must, crushed, oppressed, and heartsick, yet we shall not forget."
But most of us have forgotten. We also have forgotten to create a national holiday on August 26th, the anniversary of our own right to vote. In fact, with the exception of Mother's Day, which is on a Sunday, there are no American holidays that honor women. Even a casual glance around our nation's capital reveals dozens of men on horses who fought a war, but there are almost none to the women who also contributed to victories, or who simply stayed at home, ran farms and businesses, reared the next generation, and worked to bring peace. In the same national capital, filled with museums, there are none for the totality of the experience of American women. That is why the National Women's History Museum needs you. Please emulate Ellen Call Long and others who understood that the past is an essential prologue to the future. Support us, right here, right now.
The National Women's History Museum. Now that is certainly a museum that takes into account the many different battles that women really played a part in.
Well, and Mary, I think it's one of the it's one of the little, it's a hidden secret here in D.C. But so few people have gone there. So let me say it's right at the entrance to Arlington Cemetery, and it's very easy to get to. And for you old timers, Channel 6 actually ran a program on the museum, I think 3 or 4 years ago. I think that was fairly decent, I thought. So,
right, yeah. I think that Diane actually shot some footage, and then we use that when we do the Women's History Month. Usually we'll make a point to run some of that.
And the other thing that before I get into what I've got another subject here, Mary, is that we've tried to, in this instance, we tried to highlight a little bit the role that women have played in this holiday, which very few people will actually know about.
Right.
But Mary, let me talk just briefly about what I refer to as sort of the horrors of war that strike home to people what we're really talking about when we honor these people. World War I, there were 117,000 killed, 204,000 wounded. In World War II, there were 408,000 killed Americans and 671,000 wounded. Now, that's 1 million people, and many of those wounded, are disabled and just horrible shape. Of course, we're losing them quite rapidly now. The bloodiest day that we've ever had in our history, the American forces, was actually at Antietam. And there we lost, this was a one-day battle, 4,300 in one day. Troops, Confederate and Union soldiers were killed. And for those of you who have been up there at Antietam, remember that one big trench, and in some cases they were stacked 6 and 7 high.
That's interesting because I would have thought that I don't know, Iwo Jima. It just seemed like that was a
it was
terrible, awful battle.
But anyway, I'd like to get back now to another battle, and that was Pries, or Flanders Field in France. And there, between 1914 and 1918, in World War I, about 500,000 men were killed, and they fought over a stretch of about 2 miles. In those 2 years, they're talking 2 miles roughly. And that's the thing that inspired the great poem in Flanders Field. Now, there's a guy by the name of a lieutenant colonel by the name of John McCrae. He was a Canadian. There's conflicting stories actually how he came about composing the poem in Flanders Field, but the one I like best is that he treated a wounded soldier, a very good friend of his, who then died, and that inspired the poem in Flanders Field. And so I think if we can sort of get into that, and we can talk a little bit more.
And in terms of that, that's really where the whole, I don't know, poppies and everything that's sort of connected with Memorial Day kind of came from.
Exactly,
So Flanders Field, a battle that took place in World War I?
In World War I.
In World War I.
And that's the last part of the poem actually strikes into the red poppy thing that he saw these poppies after the earth was turned with the shells, and the poppies still came out and they were red, and he related to the blood of the soldiers that were killed out there. And so it's a very inspiring poem. I think we've used it every year since I've been here.
Really?
And it's very nice. And so anyway, we'll hear that now from.
Do you want to? So we'll take a look at we'll take a look at the video that we have of the poem, and then we'll kind of come back and we'll actually talk a little bit more about like how the poppies and the women that kind of helped, in the whole sort of
and
history.
Actually, there's a follow-on poem that's very, very inspiring that we'll talk about a little bit.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and take a look at the video, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more.
In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved. And now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
Pretty amazing.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah, well, it's almost, I don't know how to describe that, you know, beautiful field of all of those poppies, and yet when you think about what actually happened there, it's just, it's so sad.
Well, Mary, that inspired Moina Michael, who we have a picture of, we'll be showing here, to write a follow-on poem. And I want to read a little bit about her, what she wrote. She wrote an autobiography, and the Ladies' Home Journal published part of it. But let me read in her own words how it came about, and we'll read her poem.
So this is a picture of her.
Yes, that is a picture of her. She was very active in the overseas YMCA, a very active person in World War I, and did much to inspire the things that we have as far as our American soldiers were concerned. Now, when she heard the poem, she heard it and she wondered about it. Now let me tell you what she says in her own words. Moina wrote as follows, I quote in her autobiography, "I read the poem, which I had read many times previously, and studied its graphic picturization. The last verse transfixed me." And incidentally, there's really some scholars have talked about what the last verse actually meant, whether it was pro-war or anti-war, so it's rather interesting.
So then it was written well.
Yeah.
because
yeah,
no
true.
one knows.
Yeah, that's true. She says then, to you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If you break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep through poppies grow in Flanders field. She goes on, this was for me a full spiritual experience. It seemed as though the silent voices again were vocal, whispering in the signs of anxiety unto anguish. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If you break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders field. Alone again in a high moment of white resolve, I pledge to keep the faith and always to wear a red poppy of Flanders field as a sign of remembrance. In hectic times, as were those times, great emotional impact may be liberated by succeeding great ones. So I felt impelled to make a note of my pledge. I reached for a used yellow envelope, turned the blank side up, and hastily scribbled my pledge to keep the faith with all who died. Now her poem was titled, We Shall Keep the Faith. And let me just very briefly, I won't read all of it, I'll just read part of it. Oh, you who sleep in Flanders field, we cherish too the poppy red that grows on fields where valor led. It seems to signal to the skies that blood of heroes never dies. And then her last verse, and now the torch and poppy red we wear in honor of our dead. Fear not that we have died for naught, we'll teach the lesson that ye wrought in Flanders field. And that's been quoted widely, and that of course led to the red poppy days, use of the red poppy, and the American Legion, incidentally, has been the forerunner in promoting the red poppy days. So
now it's interesting because I see there's a picture of one of the red poppies, but I just have not seen them as often, I guess, in recent years, or I'm just maybe not seeing, I'm not at the right place, I guess, to go ahead and get them. It just seems like they used to be everywhere.
No, I think I feel the same way. Your point's well taken. I don't recall seeing a red poppy, frankly, on Memorial Day, except here in our videos. First time I've seen it, yeah.
Oh.
And I haven't seen any in the stores.
Isn't that interesting? Because Diane was saying the other day that there's an area, I guess in the Springfield area, where she has always seen the poppies. I just haven't seen them as much. And so, I'm sure that they probably are in different places. I think the important thing is that people do remember Memorial Day. Sometimes
Yes.
I feel as though we always look at it as just like it's a holiday and not really take that time to step back. Is there something that, I don't know, that you do, or that, when you were younger, I guess, that you used to do on Memorial Day?
When I was a child, of course, I was in a small town in northern Ohio, and we had parades on Memorial Day, and I suspect did you in your town?
Yes, we did.
That was a regular occurrence, but you don't see too much of that anymore either. Now, a couple of years ago, my wife and I were traveling up to Ohio, and we went on Memorial Day, and we went through a bunch of small towns, and all of them, they still had their parades. Now, this is about 10 years ago. So
now I know, I live in Maryland, and I know Rockville, they have a Memorial Day parade, and so that you will, you'll see that. But it's one of those times where you need to step back and just reflect on all those who have passed.
Yeah, no, it's when you see those figures and hear that, it's just horrible what we go through. But we have the liberty that we have today because of what those guys and women now, of course, have done. We're losing women in our current wars, which we didn't do in World War I or II in that sense.
Now, have you ever been to Flanders Field?
No, no. It's I think we have a cemetery there. The American troops are buried there, so it's well known. So.
And I'm thinking today, although I haven't read anything, that most of those that have fallen in the wars that we are in today come back. I'm thinking.
Back, Yeah, I don't, to my knowledge, I don't think we're keeping any cemeteries over there like in Afghanistan right now. That they're coming back, so it's very very touching. And incidentally, of course, on our national cemeteries here in the States, I think at Arlington, where they still put out flags on Memorial Day. They go around all the graves, which is very nice, of course. And so,
Right.
anyway, it's a day that we should all remember and be thankful, not only to the person that died, but the families at home, what they contributed to Memorial Day, and what women have been contributing now that we seldom recognize, except in this one video. I thought they did a nice job of that aspect of it. So
yes. And I guess if you can't get off campus, I'm sure that there'll be a couple of, I know that there's a Memorial Day sort of concert piece that's happening here too. But if nothing else, people should really take a moment and walk to the different buildings and take a look at all of the
they're beautiful shots, and if you have, even if you've seen them, you should look at them again. It's just, and we have a lot of newcomers now in Green Spring that they should certainly walk around and see them. It's very very touching.
Okay, and they will be up all day today, Monday, and then they probably, you gather them then on Tuesday.
Usually we next day we pick them up. So that's about it.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mary.
Thank you for
I'm
giving
glad
us a
we're having
little
program,
background, and I think that I don't know, it'll give us all something to pause and reflect on. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.